what is your definition of sanctuary?
Oh, so I've been, ever since you emailed me about this, I'm like, what the hell is sanctuary? Because I was thinking very much in terms of the physical space, because it's very pressing on my mind, because I fought very hard for this little room, and now I'm giving it up. So, like, so baby's got good sanctuary now and later. But it's, so if it's not a physical space, what is it? And a lot of my sanctuary is online.
Mm-hmm.
Community spaces, the work that I do, I find sanctuary in that, because sanctuary is stillness. And it's the things I'm looking for in the spaces. Stillness, solitude, not loneliness, but just like that calm.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, so sanctuary is up here in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where it's at. And I mean, I'm an air sign, so I'm up here. But like, I can find sanctuary in my husband's arms. Mm-hmm. And I can find absolute hell in my husband's arms, depending on what's going on, right? Like, yeah, don't touch me right now, yeah. Versus I need a hug, right? Like, it's all here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I make of the moment that I'm in and where I'm at.
Which is, I mean, it is so tricky when you've like made a really intentional point and, you know, fought hard to create a physical sanctuary around you and then be faced with losing it. And also that's kind of perpetually like there are more and less explicit times where we know that we are at risk of losing things.
Right.
I think like something that I've been kind of sitting not that comfortably with it, because it's something that I'm a creature who does not enjoy change and does not enjoy uncertainty. I really love security and stability, for many, many reasons. But there's also something that I've come to really value from things that are things and situations and even relationships with people that are very explicitly, I can't make you a promise of forever or of guaranteeing you this thing or of saying that yes, once we make this decision it will never change. And there's something really valuable about being honest about that from the get-go, because realistically you can never guarantee those things. You might have a baby and have to give up your office. You know, lose your house for some horrendous reason, or you might decide, okay, we thought we were going to be in this house forever and now actually we found a better place for us and we're moving. Or you might get married and then, you know, realize a few years later this isn't working. And like, there, change is the only constant that we do have. And I mean, I've been rational enough to know for basically my entire adult life that like I will never make a vow to somebody of like, if I ever get married, that I will love you forever, because you actually cannot guarantee that. No. I can make a promise of I will work shit through with you as long as this works for us. Then I am committing to making plans with you for the future, and I would love for us to grow old together. I'm not going to promise that I'm going to love you forever in the exact same way, because that's actually not something that's true.
And it's not fair.
No, because then it's also, it is, you're setting yourself up to lie to one another, and that fucking sucks. Whereas if you promise, look, I'm going to work really hard for us to build the life together that we want to, and that I will support you in the, you know, in the adventures that you want to. And that is a promise that is more realistic for me to keep. And if it happens to take us through the rest of our lives, that's a fucking bonus. But in the same way with Sanctuary, where it's like, you can't guarantee that if you build something really beautiful, that it's going to stay the same. And actually, like Amanda and I were talking about stagnance a few days ago in our live, and about how like gardens are this really beautiful, very visceral and tangible life cycle that reminds us that things are always needed. We need to tend to them if we care about them. and we can put that energy in. And also they are shifting constantly, and they are always moving and growing and changing around us, and composting and all of those other parts of the work.
Yep.
So part of part of sanctuary is accepting the fact that it is permanent and impermanent. But I feel like your point of it being in your head is like a really important aspect of it. Of ultimately, sanctuary does come down to how we are thinking and feeling about our spaces.
Hmm. Well, yeah, because my physical space, like when my office gets cluttered, it's no longer sanctuary,
Right.
you know. So it's the outside influence versus what I'm making of it in the moment, you know. But am I going to come in here and close the door when I need like 5 minutes of privacy?
Nope.
Yeah, that's my sanctuary. I can get that in the bathroom occasionally. So, you know, close the door. But it is, I realized it is it's purely how I look at it in the moment that I'm in. It's like, and I tell my husband, it's like I wake up every day and I choose you.
Yes. Yeah, it's an active choice.
It's an active choice. Are there hesitations? There have been. But it's an active choice of we're going to continue this. And we're going to grow together. Because I'm triple fixed. Like you're triple fire, I'm triple fixed. Change does not, yeah. And I've always struggled with who am I? And my husband's like, you are who you are. I was like, but who, like, but that's not the same as it was yesterday. He's like, no, you are who you are today. I'm like, but who the fuck is that? Like, it does not compute. Like, it needs to be these specific things at these specific times, and then you're that way for the rest of your life. And he's like, what the fuck is that? You evolve, you change, you grow, or I wouldn't be with you.
Yes, yeah. Part of that too, right? Where it's like, I actually want you to be like changing and like making different decisions and trying new things and
It could change, right? Let's work on that. Yeah. But and then sanctuary is the same way. It's like if I have this one fixed idea of what sanctuary is and something happens to it, what happens to me?
right. Ooh, that's a really great point. Yeah,
That's traumatic.
yeah.
And I've seen people in my life go through that. They have this thing that is their sanctuary, that is their thing, and then something comes along and just boom, go.
And then now you have an identity crisis that you're dealing
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
Mm.
So thank you. You've got the wheels turning. Like, oh yeah, we need to really sit and think about this. Because then I think about how do I pass this information on to my kids?
Totally. Yes.
Because the idea of sanctuary and what I was raised on for safety and solitude and all that is very different than what I've experienced.
Yeah.
So how do I model that for the next generation so they're a little less fucked up?
Modeling for kids is so fucking important. It is, I like, you can tell them and try to teach them all of the lessons, but if you're not modeling it for them or providing them with other folks who model it for them, like, they're going to repeat the same fucking things until somebody else comes along and helps them learn
Yeah.
different. And I like, I mean, I find it so tricky and hard, and I get so upset for the people that I love in my, who were modeled toxic behaviors and then had those toxic behaviors reinforced by culture, church, community, whatever the fuck, religious group, whatever. And I'm like, okay, but it's been so interesting having these chats about sanctuary all week and a half, because one thing that we keep coming back to is that rigidity is when things become unsafe because you're not
Mm-hmm.
for that natural flux of life and that natural shift as people need things to shift. And like, sanctuary is absolutely part of that. And when people are not given the flexibility that they need to try things and figure out what works best for them and their situation, and maybe like that doesn't need to change the core values that you have, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you might, the like communal thought process might be, well, family is the most important thing. And that is a beautiful core value. And also, if you're choosing to take it extremely literally and very rigidly, in that, okay, well, family is the most important thing, and therefore nuclear family is the only definition of it, And if it's an abusive or toxic household, that doesn't matter. You still need to maintain the semblance of
Yeah.
a structured family, despite how damaging it is for the people inside that household, because for everybody else, it makes them more comfortable. That and then I think, okay, but like queer family, we've known for years that this is a flexible and actually like if you're lucky enough to have blood family that can maintain that version and it looks and feels good and it happens to make other people comfortable, fine, but that's not the only way to define family. And there are I think about it in terms of like adoption and step families and co-parenting situations and like non-monogamous families, that like there's so many ways to build a healthy structure, and it's when we create very rigid definitions of what is and is not acceptable that, and like I think that there's also the extremes of that, of like there are certainly things where it's not acceptable, like we know we've agreed as a community, like there are some things where it's like, oh, we'll change our decisions about that, and there's other things where it's like we don't need to change, like there's certain things where that's not okay, and it doesn't ever be okay.
Which comes down to, again, not having that rigidity.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
You have to have I mean, there's a reason that sand is in a glass for an hourglass and not like concrete. you know, what did Bruce Lee say? Be like water.
Yes.
Water can be frozen and damaging, but it does a lot of damage when it's flowing as well. So you have to find the balance.
Yeah.
It's like my core value is freedom.
Yeah.
Which living in the United States right now is.
It's a word. It's so interesting. Become like a dog whistle word, which is super fucked up, right? Like anytime I hear, Tomato, they like talk about, okay, in this group, something freedom, whatever. And I'm like, ooh, they're definitely neo-Nazis. And then they're like, they've been now associated with this hate group, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yep, that sounds, but like the word should not actually have gotten to this state of being attached to something as fucked up as white supremacy.
Again, rigidity.
Yep. Right. Where the idea of freedom is my version of freedom only, and your freedom and your ability to also express your freedom is not my definition, and therefore it doesn't count.
Right. It's like my definition of freedom is freedom from you. Like freedom from assholes like you. Like no, you go over there. That's fine. You can be free over there. I'll be free over here doing not that. But and then it's just but with freedom requires flexibility, freedom requires nuance, freedom requires modeling what is free.
Yeah.
Like, do I want to keep my kids forever safe and like with me and never go out in the world? Yes. And I've been doing that for the past 2.5 years. Yes.
And also, like, there does come a point where kids need to move on, and that's like
freedom, not his.
Yeah.
You have to balance. It's like, okay, my definition of freedom is this, my value of freedom, but I value freedom more.
Yeah.
So we're going to go out and we're going to safely do things.
Right. Yeah.
Because you need to develop your own definition of freedom, not carry this baggage.
Yeah. It's so fucking true and hard. I feel like parenting is like, and I don't do it full time with anybody. So other than Willow, and even then, I'm like, there are so many days. This is also where Willow helped me realize, like, I will never be a good single parent. There are like folks who single parent, and it is like they are fucking superstars and they are amazing and everybody thrives. I will never be that. And if I am in that situation, we are not thriving. We are barely surviving, and I am putting money away into a therapy fund for you to deal with, and we are topping up the therapy fund because you will definitely need it.
Oh, we don't have a college fund in this house. We have a therapy fund.
Yeah.
Because we recognize we're not going to fuck you up the way we were fucked up, but we're going to fuck you up in different ways.
Yes.
So,
right? Like, I think this is also where I wish everyone would kind of get over any stigmas attached to therapy, because we all get fucked up from different things, regardless of how loving and like, it's actually been fascinating in my own therapy sessions, realizing that like the vast majority of my like childhood trauma other than like, the when my dad had his accident, yes, that was traumatic. It affected some very specific things, including my general concept of like safety and mortality. Actually,
Mm, yeah.
majority of my like negative messaging stuff didn't actually come from my family. It came from once I entered the world as a school child, and actually all of the good messaging and where I was most supported consistently through my life has actually been from my family. And I am extremely like grateful and privileged for that to have been the situation. I don't necessarily know whether my parents would have had the same experience with their parents, and like my grandparents were wonderful with me. Like there's all of these like layers, and I don't know whether my brother would say that if he went through therapy he'd notice the same experience. Like I have a really my personal experience is that my trauma came from other assholes, but that doesn't mean that I don't have like there's not lots of benefits from going to therapy. I have become a much more reasonable creature,
Yeah.
more balanced, and that balance still definitely comes with the ups and downs. It's just like
Oh yeah.
knowing how
They're
to
less extreme.
a little bit more,
Yeah.
less chaotically.
Yeah.
Ooh. So somebody's saying, just got my new cookbook, Divine Your Dinner, a cookbook for using tarot as your guide to magical meals.
I knew I kept out a pad of paper over here. Divine your dinner.
Cool.
Yes, please, because I have been missing cooking. I haven't really been cooking lately.
See, that's another thing that for me is like I often food, and I think this is like being partial kitchen witch, where like there's very much sanctuary for me in my kitchen when I'm like in a good place. That being said, I also have disordered eating, and so my kitchen is not always my sanctuary. Sometimes my kitchen is like
Yep.
very stressful for me. So this is
Yes. I feel you right there. It's like, is it heaven or is it hell? It depends on the moment. Like,
off as much as I'm done. I'm like, oh, it went to the other, or it can be the opposite, where it like starts off as stressful and then not. Courtney McBroom and Melinda Lee Home. McBroom is a great last name.
is that is that a pseudonym? Like, is that really their name?
That's what I was. Little too perfect.
Like that's you're like born into it. Like you got the nose twitch and everything, right? Like
Yep. Oh my God, that's so fun. Uh,
yeah.
so, uh, is there anything? Oh, I kept on asking you, like, are there cheat sheets that we can find? I mean,
Oh yes.
I should join well.
Just join the fiery well. But yeah.
Like, if somebody was to Google, like, don't do overlays. So, what like keywords that people should maybe look for, like lean towards or run away from when it comes to building accessibility for their websites and web presence?
Pretty much just about anything that is going to be search engine optimization friendly
Yeah.
is going to have accessibility behind it.
It will have accessibility behind it.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a layering. Because if it's accessible, search engines love it.
Ah, okay, this makes sense. So lean into that SEO stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
also, like, I mean, honestly, like as a biz owner, that's what we've been told for a couple of decades now, I think.
About 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also
God. Yeah.
like a little bit scary, but it's also the thing where it's like if you're really going to lean into the tech side of running an online business is usually one of the first things that also like can feel really scary but doesn't need to be completely overwhelming, and there are a lot of resources around it.
There are a lot of resources. And a simple trick you can do is if you use like Chrome or Firefox or whatever, is go into your developer tools and turn off CSS on your website.
Yes, aha, that's the something script that I never.
So it's cascading style scripts. That's what makes it look pretty.
Oh, so if you turn that off, so it's literally like it's like when you set
Take the makeup off.
HTML.
What's under it?
Hey, this makes so much sense. Which honestly, like, I mean, we're also like we're talking and speaking from like two, urban spaces in countries that, in theory, have I say this in theory have reasonable internet infrastructure. In reality, a quarter of Canada's infrastructure went down for a full day on Friday because Rogers went fucked.
Yep.
So
the majority of the world does not have stable internet access.
exactly. Well, and this is the thing, right? Like when I think of, yeah, in Canada, okay, fine. In reality, I literally have my desk on top of my modem because for the entire winter, my internet is so unstable that I actually can't do my work if I'm not right on top of my modem. And I live in a city, and having traveled quite extensively through rural and remote Canada, I'm extremely aware that we don't have good cell service. We pay the most in the world. We're either the first or the second most expensive infrastructure wise as far as telecommunications in Canada. And we have absolute shit service and monopolies for the most part. There's like 2 or 3 monopolies, hence Rogers taking down a quarter of the country. But also we are still in countries where, you know, we're able to do this video chat and there's not significant buffering. We're actually able to load this shit to begin with. When I think of when I was traveling around Central Europe, and like the majority of the time things wouldn't load for me. Like when I was in the Czech Republic and trying to like read my emails, shit was not loading.
Yeah.
There are other countries in the world where it's even more fucked up than that. And so if you're focusing everything on like high resolution pictures and fancy video content and everything is based off of that, then it's not going to be that accessible.
Nope, just looking at, just having it load. And again, down to search engines, accessibility is the underlay here, not overlay, the underlay. And if your website loads faster, you'll rank higher.
Yes. Which, like, also, I mean, I'm definitely somebody who, again, I'm an impatient creature, trip fire. I don't like waiting for shit. And so if something takes too long to load, I am absolutely somebody who will click away and maybe I'll find it again and try and load it again. But I mean, it makes me think of all of the fucking recipe websites where they take a bajillion years to load so many ads on them.
Yes. And that's the only way to get the revenue because people just want the fucking recipe. They don't want the story. But you can't copyright a recipe. You can copyright the story. So we got to scroll through the page and get all that, but all the ads. And then you have ad blockers. So everything that comes up, somebody comes out to counter it.
Yes. And
so it's a constant battle. Boom, 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 boom. But, and it's like, oh, but my website's so expensive to run. And it's expensive to run because you have to pay for a higher bandwidth ready host because you have to do all of the, there's layers to all of this. But yeah, so work on SEO and shrink down your website. There used to be, I remember this because I started designing websites in 95, 96. And there used to be a little badge of honor you could put on your website if your website was under 5 kilobytes. We got to the point we were removing white space, the spaces between the code, to shrink down the size of our pages to compete for this little badge.
Now photos are bigger than that.
Yeah. Look, you can't, there is no 5 kilobytes anything. No. Yeah. And people are like, I'm more patient because I'm also curious what's going on. Like what am I waiting for? But it's people have, it keeps going down. I think our attention spans are also going down. 0.8 seconds to make a decision.
Yeah.
On your website. And if it takes 3 seconds to load,
then yeah, people
you're not going to do it. And then GDPR came out. And now everybody has cookie banners and tags. And that takes so long to load now.
Yep.
That people aren't even clicking on them. They're just scrolling the page with it blocked.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I have a reel, I think, on mine where I'm like, oh yeah, from Princess Bride, Valley of Despair, whatever it is. Because you have this much of the website to actually look at.
Yes.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, I mean, it's super fucking frustrating, but okay, so focusing on the SEO, turn off the CSS so that at the very least, you can see like, is your website readable? And what would you say for, I see a comment here and I'm going to answer it in a second, but what would you say for like product-based and or image-based folks? Like I'm thinking of like my photographer friends where it's literally their job to have an image-rich website. Or I think like for my business, I can't not have photos of yarn, you know? So it's
Right.
like, what are ways that people can like kind of work around that?
Know your audience.
Yeah.
You don't have to inundate people with the images just because you are an image centric business.
Mm-hmm.
Give people the option
Right.
of going to the images.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So have like
And
home.
have a if you're a photographer, because I've done a lot of photographer websites, have a gallery.
Yeah.
And then be very selective with the images on your other pages that highlight and correlate with the copy you're doing
Yeah.
to tell the story, not just this is a fantastic shot of a bride down the aisle. That's great. What story is it telling? You're a storyteller. You're a photographer for a wedding. You're telling a story.
Yeah.
If somebody's really more focused on how the images look, which as a bride I'm sure you would be, but I also want to understand what's your work ethic? Who are you hiring? What are you doing? How do you work? How easy is it to hire you? When are you available? Is usually top of mind for bride. Are you available?
And how much does it cost?
And how much does it cost? And then I want to be able to go to a gallery. And when I click through to a gallery, I'm expecting things to take a little longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still, you don't have to upload the raw. What is the camera at now? I stopped photography about 7 years ago, and it was 6 MB.
Oh, it's for sure more than that now because I have to, when I'm I don't even have like the fanciest of things. And when I'm exporting my images out of Lightroom after I've finished my editing, so it's not even the raw file anymore, I have to drop them down to 90% because the 10 megabyte limit that is on most, or not most, but a number of things, like that raw file or that exported edited file ends up being around 12 megabytes or kilobytes.
Oh, megabytes. Yeah. So with images, especially, you can crunch them down even further.
Yes.
So,
Oh,
like when you're exporting from Lightroom, do like 80%.
yeah. I've been doing mine.
And then make sure you're using the color space that's proper for web,
Yeah.
which will also further crunch the file. And then I use a system called Imagify, which I think is freemium, where you can upload the picture and it'll crunch it down even further, lossless, meaning you don't lose a whole lot of
See, and
the actual integrity of the image.
yeah, this is a big part of it too, right? Where it's like you're, trying to save storage space on your computer while also being in a position of like for me, where I'm not only a web-based person, I'm like, I need my photos. I literally just printed like a 2.5 by 7 foot banner for going to shows, and there's three,
Oh,
so those
yeah,
photos cannot be blurry, pixelated messes.
right.
Um, and so, especially when you're not only dealing with looking at something on a teeny tiny screen and you need it to still be visible, then the lossless portion of it is important. And like if you're, even when I like get content from people and they like send me a screenshot of something, the number of times where that screenshot, then I'm trying to use it in another space, and now this screenshot is too small of a file, and so now it's pixelated, and
Mm-hmm.
when it's going into then whatever form I'm using, whether it's that I'm making a PDF or I'm making a slightly larger graphic that's going to live on a website, then it ends up being not large enough. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's go the opposite side and get it as big of a file as possible so that then we have options for shrinking it down, making smaller copies. But it does, it's not the most simple of things. And I am, privileged to be living in a place where I can be doing those things relatively easily. Like I remember one time being in rural PEI at a friend's farm and mill, at Fleece and Harmony, and we were all watching Netflix as a group, after work one day, and I was trying to write my newsletter and edit some photos at the same time, which I do all the fucking time at home. I generally have my iPhone, I'll be checking emails while I am doing something bigger on my computer. And then I also have my iPad playing something on in the background on one of my streaming sites. And that's how I work. And so all of a sudden Netflix kept on buffering, and one of them leaned over my computer and they're like, "You have 3 tabs open?" I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "No." It's like,
Yeah.
and it was brutal. Like, and that's just the way that they always have to work. And so this is actually going to bring me to our comment about, do you have a place where you can put up a tower? We put one up. Cell service is much better. It's a repurposed windmill and like 2 or 3 old TV satellites. And I mean, the answer for me is no, I don't, because I live in a city on a postage stamp of land. But if I move out of, like, that is one of the things that I am slightly concerned about when I do move onto larger chunks of land. Even the edge of a city can drastically impact your cell service and your internet service. And I run a web based business, so like,
Yeah.
I literally cannot afford to have shitty internet. But it is something that I am going to have to consider, is probably putting up our own service tower of some sort that will, allow me to make sure that the business can literally run properly.
Yeah.
Because
I live in a donut hole. Like, I'm just outside of a fairly large city in Ohio, and the neighborhood that we happen to be in when we moved here about a decade ago. God, it's been that long. About a decade ago. Time is really hitting me lately. None of our cell phones worked. I'm like, here. And so we go to the store, and it's like, is it? Of course, they're like, well, it's your phone. And I'm like, it's not the phone. What's up? Where is the signal? Where are the towers? We live by some towers. What is going on? And they just, the way that they crossed, missed us.
fucking wild.
It's like 4 or 5 houses in a little hole on the map, and we were in it. Like, okay, well, we're switching services, thank you. And then trying to find a service that didn't rely on that underlying structure, because all of these different things, they're all sharing the same cellular towers and everything. Oh, it was ridiculous trying to find somebody
That is
where the phone service actually worked.
so. Did you end up like?
Yes. Yeah.
That's good, but
I'm not with a company I want to be with, but we have cell phone service.
also the thing, right? Is that like, in Canada, for example, it's a fucking giant country, and we also are dealing with monopolies. There's like 3 major companies that oversee everything, and
Yep.
all of the like other services end up off of them. So I am with Kudo for my cell phone, which is the one that gives me the most flexibility and travels the best, which, especially when I came back from the UK, was important, because at that point I was in theater and I was anticipating moving around to a very large portion of the country, not always in major cities. And so that was important. And now it remains important because of the amount of work that I do, especially dealing with farms and going and finding people like wherever the fuck they are remotely to deal with fiber shed stuff, and the travel in between. Like, it is very important that I am able to be connecting as much as possible across the country. Rogers, meanwhile, that went down on the weekend, basically doesn't exist on the East Coast. It still impacted everybody because of the way that down the it took down 911 services only for and that, which was like highly questionable and problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also took down Interact services, and it took down a lot of banking services. And so even if you weren't with Rogers, if you were a small business trying to sell shit, you could only do cash and credit. And so a lot of folks just straight up closed shop because it wasn't
cheaper.
Exactly. Like, keeping the doors open on Friday didn't make sense. But it's, like, Kudo is owned by TELUS, so the reason that I'm able to get generally okay across at least the southern part of the country is because TELUS has a pretty wide range. And then meanwhile, Rogers is primarily on the west side of the country. Bell is primarily on the east side of the country into the middle. And Bell also, years ago, purchased up NTS, which was our local communications. And I don't work with them because when I lived on the East Coast and was dealing with Bell, they were a fucking nightmare. And so I knew I am never dealing with you again. Any of your subsidiaries, I am also not dealing with because you're garbage. But
Yep.
you know, it also means that I have one other real option where I live for then my internet service, and that's Shaw. And they used to be completely local based, and in the last few years, all of their customer service has shipped massively offshore. And so when I used to be able to phone and get somebody who then was literally in the city and was dealing with stuff, now they're often in Belize, somewhere in the Caribbean. And it's like, okay, well, you don't even know what fucking weather we have today working. You're just looking at a screen and you can see the back end, and that's about as good as we're going to get.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just, I mean, it's wild because then, you know, those services primarily are focused around urban centers. And so as soon as you move out of the urban centers, it just gets so much more complicated. And it makes me think of, you know, being in the UK where I could literally I pay cheap by Canadian dollars for my cell phone plan. I pay $55 a month after tax. And that's like cheap for what I use. But me,
Wow.
I was getting the exact same stuff in the UK for a tenner every month. And if I didn't like who I was working with, I was with three at the time. They were fucking fantastic. They were great. Anytime I needed to call the help desk, I was talking to some man in Glasgow. And it would always change, but they would always, you know, I'd get on fabulous Glaswegian dialect, and it was fine for me because we have friends from Glasgow that I've grown up with. So, but, you know, if I didn't like them, I had so many other options to go to. And there was always, you know, if you were like, oh, I'm going somewhere for even let's say a week and I'm going to have to go work in this location, three doesn't have good coverage there, I can go and buy a SIM card, stick it in my phone for this other company that does have coverage, and we're good. I can do a SIM card for a week. And we just don't have those options here in Canada. I think in the States there's like a couple more options than we have, but it also depends on.
There's the illusion of choice.
Aha.
And that's in tech entirely because, and I see this a lot in web-based things too. When it comes to telecommunications, especially here in the United States, phone is a utility.
Mhm.
Cell phone and data are not.
Wild. And yet
So
all function. Well, the majority of us function. Many of us function because also it's very much class related as well. So
very much so, because it's because data and all this is not a utility and thus not federally protected.
yes, even
Do
though
you remember landlines?
yeah,
You know, where there was actual wire into your house to the telephone pole.
not a dot.
You know, and I still have one. Yeah. There's a huge trend of these huge telecommunications companies to undo landline.
Yes, my parents have friends who literally like their, and actually my parents the last couple of weeks turned out that it was a wire that had shorted, but they just assumed because multiple of their friends who also are like older have landlines only don't, and actually one of them had a cell phone and she didn't even have cell service. Like they just straight up were like, we're cutting off service to this chunk of people. And
Mhm.
can't even she was able to call 911 because she wasn't with Rogers, and that is supposed to be a protected thing where even if you don't have service you can.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
supposed to be, but like, you know, this past weekend made it very clear that there are gaps even with that.
Hey, I mean, my mom drives around and looks at the state of things and wonders how bridges stay up. I look around and go, how does anything tech related function?
Mm.
Because it's all MacGyvered.
It,
It is, and there is no clear structure of anything. and everything is layered on top, but the foundation, it's like a fucking tower card. The foundation
Is not
in tech is not so good. So I'm just waiting for the topple.
right.
And so I like to decentralize as much as I can. And then, of course, now you talk about decentralization, crypto pops up. But it's just, different options. But it's all purely the illusion of choice.
Yes.
Because it's like you can say, okay, I'm going to have MailChimp, I'm going to have ConvertKit, I'm going to have this for that, this for that. They all rely on AWS.
Which Sam.
So, which is Amazon Web Services for their content delivery network, or CDN, which just essentially means the cloud, which is basically a room full of a shit ton of computers. There's no cloud. If that goes down and it's running 30% of the internet, that means 30% of the internet goes down.
Yeah.
It's the illusion of choice because everybody's relying on somebody else that's much bigger, and it's all interconnected.
Well,
There is nothing fully decentralized.
I think that this does come down as well to when we're trying to, as small businesses, I realize also we're like going on 2 hours of talking. So,
Oh, shit.
but I'm just enjoying this chat. But it's, as small businesses, when we are trying to create sanctuary for our own brains in terms of simplifying things, and then also figuring out like, how do we serve our customers best where they are in the best way possible with as few bells and whistles to just like make it easy for us to talk to them and them to be able to talk to us, and also do all of the other parts of running our businesses. And when you make choices, you can do the best that you can, and also there are going to be compromises that you have to make, right? Like I think that Zuckerberg is garbage, and that the Meta platform is highly problematic, and that social media in general across the board, with the exception of, honestly, I think Pinterest is just feeding our shittiness to each other. And Pinterest serves slightly different purposes, and can be problematic in other ways.
You can go down some scary rabbit holes on Pinterest.
Oh, yes, that's true too, which is,
Yes.
I haven't personally experienced that, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have. And I have images seared into my head that will not go away. Yeah.
But, I still run an online-based business, product-based business that has an audience that is primarily on social media. It is one of the best ways for me to be connecting with people. It is not free for me anymore, and certainly not free as far as labor involved, but
right.
I'm not spending advertising dollars. And while the algorithm may fuck with the amount of people that are able to see my content as they try to make me pay advertising dollars, I don't have to. And that is very different from 30 years ago when social media wasn't in existence yet, and as you were making other choices. And so we can, I try to tell my design students this, like, what you want to do ideally is set yourself up for not being completely reliant on a single platform, on a single service provider, unless you own it. And if then you're going to be reliant on one, then at least you're in theory owning it, right? Like, don't rely on a third party officially, but also realistically, you are still reliant on a third party.
You will always, that's the thing. Myth busted. You will always be relying on a third party. I rely on several third parties for my website to exist.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, if one of them goes down or one of them fails, then like you are, like, decentralizing, like we were saying, is like it's ideal as much as possible. And also there are so many layers to it that you're just not going to know and understand, that make the best decision that you can, and then accept that there are going to be compromises that you have to make. And also don't go, judging people who make different decisions than you harshly, especially when you don't have all of the facts, right? Like, I can have opinions about people who choose to be on certain platforms. And there might be certain platforms where I'm straight up like, this makes me like really fucking uncomfortable, right? Like, you know, if you're on, I can't even remember what it's called anymore, but the platform where basically all the Nazis were like, this is a comfortable spot for us. Like, if you're going to also choose to be sharing space with them, I'm probably going to have some questions about it.
But the fascinating thing there,
On Instagram, it's not like they don't exist here.
right? But the fascinating thing with the alt-right and the active white supremacists that are like gung ho about all this is that they try to get away from these platforms because the meta platforms, because they disagree with how their values are very different, right? And then they go off and make their own thing and it doesn't work, so they have to come back.
Yes. Also,
you know why?
Because they have to be reliant on it.
Because they're siloed in their communities.
Aha, yes.
Their little sanctuary,
yeah,
is rigid.
Yeah, and it does not serve them
and it doesn't serve the same purpose.
This is so wild. So interesting.
This is how we go for 2 hours.
Rich place of humanity. But you're also finding that Twitter's actually become a much easier space for you to be running the work that you need to be doing.
Yes. So, I mean,
we're in very.
Twitter is it heaven or is it hell? It's much easier for me to just pop out and be like, I'm done for the day. I can't do this. Instagram, there's a visual dopamine something.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, oh. But at some point on Twitter, I get tired of reading people's opinions. I go, okay, no, we're good. And it's just where my brain is at right now. And also, I used to be a photographer, so I have a very mixed relationship with photography in general because I got burnt the fuck out on it. So being on Instagram, there's this pressure to perform, this pressure to show up. Oh, you were a professional photographer. You should. And it's just like, I miss just taking pictures of my pizza at Dewey's with the crappy filters that all us photographers used to be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yes.
I miss those days.
It's really funny. Like, I was on Pinterest earlier this morning and scrolling. It's become my new scroll space. I don't necessarily know that that's a good thing. Yeah, I gotta figure out my boundaries with that one. But literally one of the pins that came up, and this is part of what I do love about Pinterest, is that the lifespan of your content is exponentially longer. It makes it plan launching around using Pinterest. There is strategy for it. I'm not fully convinced. I'm much more about like,
call Pinterest directly.
Call Pinterest. Really? Interesting.
Tip. Call Pinterest directly. They will help you do that. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the thing that I'll keep in mind the next time I didn't do it.
But
I also, the whole point of the Sanctuary Hub is that, like, you get content that then you can use while I am busy writing this book. So the content, you know, like, even if you don't join during this launch period, you can join at any time.
I love that.
Right now.
Yeah.
You can join at any time. We're doing the Creative Coven Challenge live this upcoming week. But to run it yourself, to do the exercises yourself after the fact, you can absolutely do. You're just not going to have Zoom, you know, hangouts with me for the next week to do it with you.
Which really, y'all watching, listening, is the best part, is to hang out with Ash. Come on. It is. I mean, we've been going for 2 hours. This is.
Oh, we should actually wrap this up. Like, I was on Pinterest, and literally one of the pins that came up was the shittiest photo I have seen in a very long time. Like, crappy lighting, not edited, looked like garbage, but it was showing the way that different decorating tips for icing create different patterns on cupcakes. And, like, you know that this was bad when it's like, it's on somebody's, like, shitty brown countertop. They did a chocolate cupcake with vanilla icing, but the lighting made it look like yellow icing. And it also was like a slightly melted buttercream instead of like really crisp matte light. I'm like, okay, this photo is from at least 2000. But it showed up in Pinterest, right? And it's like, it still served its purpose. It still showed me what the different icing tips do. And realistically, probably more similar to what my icing is going to look like. Because I'm not a maker.
Again, know your audience.
Yes.
Like when you show something so professional and so crisp and clean, people get intimidated and won't try it.
Yeah, totally. This is where Pinterest fail comes in and where
Yes. But I used to share recipes and different things on a personal blog, and one ended up on Pinterest, and it is the worst photo because it's sauerkraut and pork, which is very yellow,
yes, and
very tan, and in a bisque colored pan. And it's like just my oven light. Here we go. So it's just pure yellow. And I'm like, why did this go viral?
right. Yes.
Because it showed what it's going to look like
Yeah.
in your kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's so,
If mine looks like that, it's still going to taste good. Okay, we're good.
well, that's the thing, right? Like it was so funny when Samson and I were photographing the patterns for or the not the patterns, Butch. And that like one of the recipes that is fucking delicious is holopki, which is cabbage rolls. And it is very hard to make cabbage rolls at any stage of the process post cooking look attractive. It is
Yeah.
goopy, blobby brown mess that tastes fucking delicious because also Polish cabbage rolls are basically mini meatloaves wrapped in saucy cabbage, and it is so good.
Oh, now I'm hungry.
Take
Okay.
sexy photos of holopki is like not that easy. It is, but they did turn out very good as you know as far as options go. But yeah, it was pretty fucking funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But it just, I mean, what is going to hit somebody's fancy at one point versus another? It depends on where they are.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi, my love. Okay, Willow's like, you guys have been talking for 2 hours. It's time for my lunch for sure. Also, Sunday is the day that she gets to go see Grandma and Grandpa. So we're gonna see.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll see.
All right.
Did she react to go see? Go see?
Now she's just gonna stretch and stick her butt in my face. Very nice. This has been absolutely delightful. So if people want this wonderful combo of tech, wizardry, witchiness, and therapy, where can they find you? Also, how are like with your mat leave coming up at the end of the year, if people are wanting to work with you in a bigger way, what do your books look like? What are timeframes kind of looking like? And then also, what's the best way for them to be getting in touch with you?
So best way is through my website or email, thefierywell.com. And your best bet to get a hold of me is the membership. I am scaling back even now, one-on-one work, except for members and existing clients. So we're pivoting and restructuring a little bit to expand the community and really narrow down how many times I do full websites, because just listening with me, they're pretty intensive process to go through with me, because we're it's therapy. I don't like to call myself a coach, but everybody calls me one. So it's like, I know.
Like,
So
I'm a coach because I legit am like not that, I'm not willing to get that invested. I absolutely give a shit about like how people are feeling and I will help them navigate stuff. But like, I'm much more comfortable with like, okay, you've got this question. Here, I'll give you like my experience with navigating that particular thing. And then like, here's some specific tools for it, which I guess is also sort of coaching, but the like raw therapy portion of it, I don't do in the same way that you do. Like, I feel like every time we're doing stuff with you, it's coaching.
it's a therapy session. It is. And it's we dig deep for even the little things. So if you're not ready for that, you would not enjoy your time in the Fiery Well. But if you're in the Midwest, because that seems to be the largest demographic, if you're in the Midwest of North America, come on in. But yeah, so I am due on election day here in the United States, which is November. Huh?
You'll be busy with something else.
That's a big contention in the family. It's like, I will waddle in and vote if I have to. It's like, and I will give birth.
Able to do it. Advanced voting also suppressed where you are now?
Not yet.
Lovely.
So I've got the mail-in ballot ready to go to put in, but we'll see where it all heads because it's just, yeah, Ohio's fun. But yeah, so one-on-one work is going to be for members only or existing clients, at least until probably mid-time next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I'm in the well every fucking day.
you are tech agnostic, so regardless of
Yeah.
tools you come in with, Patty can help you with. If you are looking for new tools, Patty has a plethora of things that she will be able to vouch for slash have opinions about, but ultimately won't make your decision for you, which is
No.
great because every time I'm like, no, I don't like WordPress. Come and help me.
Like, can you do this in WordPress? Yes. Do you have to? No.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's a good time. Perfect. Thank you so much for this. This has been
You're
absolutely
welcome. Thank you.
thank
I
you.
always love
Oh,
talking with you. Yeah.
last 2 hours. I knew this was going to end up happening with at least one person. I'm just that Instagram hasn't decided to kick us off. That was kind of my main concern. Probably this would have happened with everybody if I'm not good with boundaries on time. I'm like, I'm enjoying talking. Let's keep talking.
My clock is over there, so I haven't been looking. It's like, oh, yeah. No, I've been talking with you is so easy and effortless and fun.
Yay.
So, and yeah, no, and everybody join Sanctuary, purchase from this lovely person's shop. Like, my problem is I can't decide what color.
Okay, but you need to decide what color in the next couple of weeks because then everything is getting pulled off of the shop shelf.
Yeah.
Then deal with the next. I'm actually this week, I have a few batches of dyeing left to do. And I'm like getting to the point of limited yarn stock for the whatever the fuck like holes I'm going to need to fill. So I'm inventorying everything this week, but it'll stay on the online shelves. But I'm inventorying everything to then figure out, okay, what holes do I need to fill so that then once we have everything shipped off for festival season, we're good to go. So, and then we'll have shopping reopening in theory in October, but I have no fucking clue. I was talking to a friend earlier today about how everything is snowballing from Twist onward, like from basically August through November, my plans are going to be rolling according to what happens in August. So, just shit's going to happen. I just don't know what. So, if you need anything, honestly, for between now and holiday season, make your purchase in the next couple of weeks because I honestly can't even guarantee that I'm going to be doing a shop update in October. It's all going to depend on what the fuck's happening.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be, ooh, raspberry waffle sounds delicious.
Wait, who does this keep bringing up food? You're making the pregnant woman hungry.
That's I would just be eating all the food all the time. I have the weird cravings already. Like I don't need to be pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
I already enjoy pickles and ice cream.
Oh, no.
That's awful. Yep, yep. But yes, the Sanctuary Hub is open right now, obviously, and will stay open because it's part of the Creative Coven community. All of the digital courses, the community, and digital products won't be going away. Just all of the physical products are going to be going away whilst I am traveling with them to different places to then sell in person, which is going to be wild. I haven't done that in a while, so it's going to be interesting. Yeah, it'll be.
I think you'll have a blast.
I'm excited. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to join us for the Creative Coven Challenge, which is my signature swatching challenge to get your creativity, knitting mojo, making mojo back up and running, we're going to be doing that this week, starting tomorrow evening via Zoom, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And you can join us via the link in my bio, ashalberg.com/sanctuary. Find Patty at thefierywell.com. And thank you all so much. Tomorrow I am going to be back for not technically the last chat, but the last chat of this like big run of Instagram chats. The photographer himself, Samson Learn. He is the photographer of all of my books and will be the photographer for Sanctuary. And so we're going to be chatting with him. It's going to be delightful. It may be too, I feel like Samson's a little bit better with time management than I am, so probably will actually be at the hour. But yeah, thank you all so much for sticking around this long. If you want to play, thank you for sticking around for 2 hours. Uh, and we'll be back here tomorrow. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.